What's happening, everybody? Ram Dean and Black with you here in our FN studios. The UFC had a media day on Thursday where they featured some of the fighters on the UFC 206 fight card. We had a chance to talk to a number of coaches. I talked to Duane Ludwig. We both talked to Lee Meehan, Duke Roufus. What were some of the big takeaways you learned from the coaches' minds?
Yeah, I'm always really motivated to sit down and chat with these guys because they're the guys that are kind of pioneering the future, or they're looking ahead. Duane in particular. Duane is taking some real thought experiments and pushing forward with some ideas. There are things that people still believe are true if they're not up to speed on things, that, you know, the more mobile you are, the less power you have, the more power. You know, we used to call this the Cruz-Lineker dilemma. If you become more mobile, you're less attached to the ground, so you may have less power. Lineker's more attached to the ground, but he's less mobile. Duane is just shattering things like that, and because they're not true. A lot of these limiting ideas that we say, oh, you can never kick a wrestler. That's not true. That's absurd. So a lot of the best coaches are pushing past these things. Immediately, things that people were accepting as realities are like, these aren't true. This is fighting. We can do whatever we want.
But aren't there truths at the time? There was a time, if you were a kickboxer and you throw a kick at a wrestler, you're going down. That's a fundamental truth.
Right.
Now it's the responsibility of the kickboxer to learn how to ensure that he stays upright. So as much as, yes, it may not be a truth now, it's a truth at some point. Now you have to go through the experiment of making it not a truth.
It was never a truth that I couldn't kick a wrestler if I was a kickboxer. It was just a temporary detail that he was more likely to catch my kick and put me down. But the truth was I could kick a wrestler, and if I looked at it, what was the issue? If I kicked him, he would grab my foot. Okay, so what does that mean? That means he tries to grab my foot. Cool, why don't I make him think the kick is coming here when he goes to grab my foot, go somewhere else? Penalize him for that action. Make that thing that he does a negative for him. And so we accepted for the last 5-7 years, that 2.0 era, the GSP through Anderson Silva, Matt Hughes to Anderson Silva, that we accepted all these things that, you know, in MMA you must do this, this, and this. And the best coaches now, you talk to these guys, that shit is out the window. They realize in these moments, they're, you know, all of these things that you convinced yourself was true were just ways to limit yourself. You know, for Duane, we were talking, and Duke, I was talking about the same idea. How many stances are there? There's a southpaw and there's an orthodox, you know, there are no stances, or there are all stances, but it's a philosophical idea that I could square up. I could be in no stance at all. I could move backwards. I could put my back to you.
Does this go back to Bruce Lee in the sense that, you know, we've gotten so accustomed to naming things, where Bruce Lee, even when he was naming his own art, Jeet Kune Do, is like, we shouldn't be naming this because it's limiting us to the bigger picture of martial arts.
The worst things that happen are as you're going down a path, you find a word that stops your progress. So, you know, as soon as everybody says, you know, oh my God, that guy has a great volume of punches. Well, now we don't have to speak about it anymore. We're done. We know that's it. We're done. Even the term, you know, a scramble. A scramble is a word we get to where we no longer feel the necessity to describe what's going on. Oh, it was a scramble. A scramble is just a word that stops your path along understanding. So all of these naming, all of these structural rules, even something I never foresaw 3 or 4 years ago when a few people started looking at the analysis of fighting, is that ultimately we would be responsible for stopping the progress. If you say, you name everything, that guy has, you know, great durability. Well, we no longer have to describe what it means to be able to take a punch, why you can take a punch on one night and not another, what it is to develop that. He's durable. We're done. We're finished. Oh man, he's got good accuracy. We don't have to describe what that means. These words limit us in our path. And it's true in the way that coaches, in the way that people were fighting, in the way that the rooms were happening. Everybody was simulating something that worked 4 years ago. And then along came these smart guys, these Duane Ludwigs, these Dukes, these Coach Kavanaugh and Conor McGregors. And they were like, everybody's doing the same stuff and nobody's evolving. The martial arts is about evolution. And they quietly went around the back door and started evolving new concepts. And now all of those people who were doing all identical stuff and describing it, expressing it identical ways, have to look and go, what's Duane doing? Oh my God, I better play catch up. And in the 3 years it'll take you to catch up, that guy will be 6 years ahead of you.
I'll tell you what I found fascinating. I talked to Duane Ludwig as well, who's going to be in the corner of Matt Brown. And if you train in martial arts for any length of time, or you have different coaches, you're learning specific aspects. And if you study under a specific system, you do things a certain way. And Matt Brown had learned how to fight before he met Duane Ludwig. And I'm sure there's a lot of coaches that have to teach you how to break habits. Okay,
Yes.
there's a whole bunch of bad habits that you have. Duane's not like that at all. He's like, we're just going to go with what Matt's good at and his strengths. Let Matt fight his fight, and I'm going to give him different paths so he can do his thing.
Yeah, and some of those paths for Matt were just entries and exits. What are we doing when we enter into the range and the zone that we want to be in? How are we hurting you on the way in and protecting ourselves? How do we get into that place we want to be? And how do we hurt you and protect ourselves on the way out? That simple idea. And how do we make you need to reset in a fight? And when you do, we beat you up. Those 2 or 3 simple concepts. Now we've got a Matt Brown who's already a smashing machine, and we've just added 2 or 3 routes for him to get to that and get out unhurt. You know, that's all fine and good, but you still have to go fight, because on the other side, you've got a Donald Cerrone, who he and his coaches are building their own systems. And, you know, there are certain things that are just real no matter whether you care about it or not, whether you believe it or not. Gravity is real, whether you believe it or not. It will always be at play. And that is some of the truths of what's happening in a fight, too. It's great to enter a certain way. It's great to exit a certain way. It's great to play in a certain way. But that is ignoring the fact that Cowboy Cerrone has his own agenda. And that's why we watch these things. These brilliant coaches work with these brilliant athletes to come up with this independent plan and strategy and way to build this. And then we bring these 2 things together and we celebrate on Saturday night the chance to see it in action.
I'll tell you another thing I found fascinating is that everybody always has their own angle. You look at Duane Ludwig, for example. He and Matt Brown, that's a new relationship. Duke Roufus and Anthony Pettis, that's a long-lasting relationship between a coach and a student. Misha Serkinov, he's his own head coach.
McDessie just left.
Exactly.
Now he's built his own team.
So when you're looking at that, what is the right formula?
I just don't think there's any evidence that being your own coach is the right formula. Evan Tanner will be the example that you use, but what was that, 1912?
Sure.
You know what I mean? It was a long time ago. You need
BJ
leadership.
Penn?
BJ Penn, yeah, and we'll see how he does at the end of the month.
But
no longer is he his own head coach.
No longer, exactly.
If you got a guy as smart as him with a history of that line of thinking who eventually realizes, damn, I need leadership, you know, that shows you right there. Misha and John McDessie, I hope they have brilliant performances, and I hope they do well. And I hope that if and when they do well, they go back and say, I am succeeding despite missing head coaching, not because of it, because I don't believe that's so. I don't think there's any evidence that that's so. And I think the evidence says that the very best ones right now, the Duanes, the Matt Humes, you know, the Ferrazes, these people, Greg Jackson, these people, Duke, they elevate your game. John Crouch, they elevate the fighter. They lead the fighter to something special.
So many great coaches will be in the corners of some of these amazing athletes. UFC 206 goes down on Saturday night. I promise it's going to be a hell of a fight card.